Good afternoon, everyone. It must be Tuesday. We know it's about 2:01, so I want to welcome you to the Nutrition Services Division's fourth School Meals for All Students California Universal Meals listening session. As we are all thinking about and preparing for how to operationalize universal meals in the next school year, I truly want to thank all of you for partnering with the NSD team to really make this successful. Your input continues to be so valuable, and it really does help to shape policy and the resources and the training. And in all honesty, it really does help to keep it real and helps us to really better understand the day-to-day realities for standing up something as huge as universal meals in California. So to that end, we will continue to provide these monthly informational sessions as we all settle into universal meals. We have our web pages. We're continuing to put new resources there and evolve and to make sure that you have links to really important information. We're continuing to build that out with additional resources. We have also just very recently released 16 school nutrition program resource guides to help all of you with implementing the requirements of the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program. So please do take advantage and look through those resource guides, job aids. They are great training tools, they're great refreshers, and you can actually use them for a lot of your professional development trainings that you're doing with staff during in-services. And of course, we have our Universal Meals mailbox. Please send questions. We track those, we categorize them, and we post those on our website when we get the frequently asked questions. So they really are quite valuable. And of course, the excellent questions that we get through these listening sessions, please continue to submit those and keep those coming. We really do value that so much. So today's session, we are going to focus on the school breakfast program. The California Universal Meals Program requires that public school districts, county offices of education, charter schools provide a breakfast and a lunch every school day to all students if they request it. But not all school sites currently serve breakfast, and historically we know that fewer students actually participate in the breakfast program. So we want to just talk through and talk about what are the requirements and then share some best practices. So to help facilitate that today, I'm joined by the school nutrition team, starting with Gurjeet Barea, who's the senior manager for the school nutrition programs section. We have Tara Massey and Becca Shoop, they are both the managers of our northern and southern school teams. Becca's going to be providing an overview of the requirements for the school breakfast program and talking about the meal pattern requirements and the application process. And then Tara will be sharing best practices for operating school breakfast programs, talking about funding opportunities, and also for those that maybe are not taking advantage of USDA foods, how you can incorporate those foods into your breakfast menus. And then we have to keep it real, so we'll be sharing some real life strategies to help maximize your school breakfast programs. We have two of your colleagues joining us today. We have Dominic Maki from Mount Diablo Unified School District and Susie Hatwick from Burton Elementary School that will be sharing their breakfast programs. And then finally, Gurjeet will bring it all together and wrap it up with a nice bow and address those frequently asked questions and close out our day together. So to get us starting and to help frame our breakfast discussion, we have a polling question for you. So you'll see that pop up, and we're interested in knowing what is the percentage of your student enrollment currently participating in your breakfast program. So pick the answer that best represents your student population. Less than 20%, 20 to 50%, more than 50%, or we do not currently provide breakfast. So just take a couple of seconds. All righty. So less than 20%, there was about 22% of you said that, 20 to 50%, 45%, more than 50%, 22 of you, and then 11% of you said that we are currently not participating in the breakfast program. So you're in the right listening session. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So the intent of the California Universal Meals Program, it is truly to provide greater access for all of our students so that they have access to nutritious school meals each and every school day, regardless of their eligibility. So we like to just share this each listening session, that Universal Meals has three main components to the program. First, it updates the current state meal mandate. So starting next school year, all public school districts, county offices of ed, and charter schools are required to offer a breakfast and a lunch at no charge during each school day to students requesting a meal, regardless of their free, reduced, or paid eligibility. The second component, it requires all eligible schools to participate in a federal provision. So those LEAs that are defined as high poverty schools are required to adopt a federal universal meal service provision, such as Provision 2 or Community Eligibility or CEP. High poverty schools are defined as those schools that have an identified student percentage or ISP over 40%. So that means that 40% of your enrolled students have been determined to be eligible for free or reduced price meals through direct certification or identification as runaway, foster, migrant, or homeless. And then the third component is the state providing funding through the state meal reimbursement. That is intended to cover the cost of the reduced and paid meals to those LEAs that are participating in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program. And schools do need to still follow all the federal requirements, such as the meal standards, documentation, and reporting requirements. So with that, it is a great pleasure to introduce Becca, who will be discussing not only the value of breakfast, but also going over the requirements for the school breakfast program. Take it away, Becca.
Thanks, Kim. So like Kim said, I will be providing an overview of the school breakfast program, or SBP, which is the federally funded program that assists schools and other agencies in providing nutritious breakfast to children. So why is it important to operate the school breakfast program? First and foremost, it'll be a requirement for public school districts, county offices of education, and charter schools to provide breakfast under universal meals. And in order to receive any of the additional state universal meals funding, you must be an approved SBP sponsor. And aside from the universal meals component, there are many children who may not have the opportunity to eat breakfast, or maybe don't even have access to meals at home. And for these children, breakfast at school can result in better attendance, fewer disciplinary issues, and overall academic success. As many of us know, research continues to show that students who eat breakfast are more likely to make healthier choices throughout the day, and we can ensure that those students receiving breakfast at school are receiving highly nutritious meals. As we've mentioned previously in earlier listening sessions, the reimbursement for meals served under the SBP will be fully reimbursed by both federal and state funds. Regardless of a student's eligibility, all meals served will be reimbursed at the federal free reimbursement rate. But in order to receive this additional state funding, you must be an approved sponsor of both the National School Lunch Program, or NSLP, and the SBP. For a more thorough breakdown of the per meal reimbursement under the California Universal Meals Program, please feel free to revisit the previous listening session recording from October, and we'll go ahead and drop a link directly to that recording in the chat now. In addition to the per meal reimbursement, the CDE also offers funding opportunities for SBP startup and expansion initiatives, and this will be something we discuss a little bit later on in the presentation. So in order to operate the school breakfast program, you must first be approved by the CDE. Similarly to the NSLP, approved sponsors must comply with all federal and state regulations in order to operate the program. And SBP sponsors will be will be reviewed during a sponsor's regularly scheduled school nutrition program administrative review. Under universal meals, all students will eat for free, but it's still a federal requirement to determine eligibility and count and claim those meals by eligibility type, unless you're operating under a federal provision. If you're an existing NSLP sponsor and are needing to add the school breakfast program, you'll first need to reach out to your assigned school nutrition programs analyst. Your analyst will help guide you through the next steps, where you'll be asked to update your CNIP site applications and then submit menu documents. Once those applications and menus have been approved, you'll be able to submit claims for reimbursement. Approval on the program is contingent on the menu and supporting menu documents demonstrating a compliant meal service. So this means that your program must meet current regulations and meal pattern requirements. It's also important to note that the menu review approval can take up to 30 days once the required documents are received. So once you've initiated that process to add the breakfast program and you've received that initial email from your SNP analyst, you can expect a separate email from your SNP Child Nutrition Consultant, or CNC, with instructions on submitting those required menu documents. They'll also include some helpful links and resources to support you in implementing a successful breakfast program. The menu documents you'll need to submit include a 1-week menu, USDA worksheet, and menu production record, or MPR. And these menu documents are required to represent and support a planned meal service for the same week. Additionally, the menu documents can either represent current service or reflect planned service for the 22-23 school year. The CDE can accept planned menus up to 6 months in advance, and we'll go ahead and drop a few links in the chat for additional guidance, resources, USDA worksheet templates, and CDE MPR forms. The SBP requires 3 food components: fruits, grains that are whole grain rich, and at least 2 fluid milk choices. Each required component has daily and weekly minimums, which are based on the grade group served at each school site. The CDE has a variety of resources available on our website to help as you plan and administer your breakfast program. And the links for all of these resources listed here will be provided in the chat for you now. For program operators that have already been approved for the SBP at 1 or more sites, you won't need to go through the application process again in order to add additional SBP sites. You'll simply revise your application in CNIPS to reflect that the SBP is being operated at each site. And once your SNP analyst approves the changes in CNIPS, you'll be able to submit claims for reimbursement. If you're not currently approved to operate the school breakfast or national school lunch programs, the approval process will look differently. So please contact your assigned SNP analyst, or you can email our general inbox, snpinfo@cde.ca.gov, for more information on starting this process. Before we go on, we are going to do another polling question. So we would like to know, what challenges does your program face in providing breakfast? And go ahead and select all that apply. Do you generally lack support from administration and/or school site staff? Do you have limited equipment and or staffing to facilitate a successful breakfast program? Or is your largest obstacle funding to support a breakfast program? So it looks like across the board, most have a lack of support from administration or school site staff and limited equipment in our staffing. So thank you so much for participating in that. Like Kim said, that's what we can use to create trainings, policy, and help you facilitate this. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Tara Mass, who will cover best practices in serving school breakfast.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start by discussing some best practices in breakfast service. We'll cover traditional breakfast, breakfast after the bell, breakfast in the classroom, and grab-and-go breakfast. But before I start, we have another polling question for you. So we want to know what type of breakfast service you are currently providing. In this poll, you can select all that apply. So your options are breakfast in the classroom, traditional breakfast served before the bell, breakfast after the bell, such as second chance breakfast or breakfast during recess or breaks. Or if you currently don't offer breakfast, you can let us know that too. All right, we have 19% have breakfast in the classroom. Okay. 70% traditional service or breakfast before the bell, 50% breakfast after the bell, and then we have the 12% who do not currently provide breakfast. So hopefully we can give that 12% some good ideas today. Okay, so let's start with discussing traditional breakfast service, which it looks like a lot of you out there are implementing at this point. So traditional or before the bell breakfast service takes place in the cafeteria before the school day begins. And there are some benefits to serving traditional breakfast. Many planners have more flexibility in serving methods and available food items. For instance, offer versus serve may be easier to implement, and both hot and cold menu items can be served side by side with little to no special packaging considerations. So that makes it a little easier. Also note that under traditional breakfast service, you are allowed commingling flexibility. So if your pre-K students are coming through the service line at the same time as your K through 5 students, it may be operationally challenging to adhere to 2 different meal patterns. But in this instance, program operators have the flexibility to serve the same K through 5 menu to both their pre-K and older students. Additionally, since traditional breakfast service consists of meals served and eaten in the cafeteria, there may be fewer direct approvals needed from school stakeholders compared to alternative service models. As an alternative to traditional school breakfast served before the start of the school day, breakfast after the bell programs begin service after the school day begins. This can eliminate participation barriers such as transportation issues, earlier start times, or students just prioritizing other activities before school begins. Breakfast after the bell can integrate breakfast with instructional time, like with breakfast in the classroom, which we'll discuss in the next slide, or it can be served during break periods. Many schools bring breakfast to the students where they are by rolling carts out to the playground or other high traffic areas. We do want to emphasize that serving breakfast after the bell is voluntary, and we understand that there are a lot of reasons this option may not work for everyone. But moving on to breakfast in the classroom, this is another alternative breakfast service that can be conducted while educational activities are taking place. So typically students or staff deliver breakfast to the classroom from the cafeteria. Students are then able to eat breakfast in their classrooms after the official start of the school day. And students can eat breakfast while their teacher's taking attendance or reading or doing any other classroom duties. So no instructional time is lost here. Overall, it only takes about 15 minutes for students to finish eating. This service model usually results in increased participation in the school breakfast program. And we have Susie Hatwig from Burton Elementary School District sharing how her district implements breakfast in the classroom. So stay tuned for that. Grab and go breakfast is another option SFAs might consider implementing to increase breakfast participation. Grab and go meals are prepackaged reimbursable meals for students to pick up and consume in the classroom, halls, or other acceptable areas. Grab and go meals Grab and go meals can be served before school, between classes, or during breaks in the cafeteria, or on service carts in high traffic areas. Okay, now we're going to switch gears a bit and share some resources that may assist you in optimizing your school breakfast program. So we're going to share how you can use USDA foods to make reimbursable meals in the school breakfast program. And then we'll also share some information about a grant opportunity. Okay, USDA foods. Recipient agencies receive USDA Foods entitlement funds based on the total number of reimbursable lunches served in the previous school year, multiplied by the current meal rate provided by the USDA. This year's meal rate is 39.75 cents. In other words, USDA Foods entitlement determines the dollar value of USDA Foods each recipient agency is eligible to receive. Although USDA Foods entitlement is based on total lunches served, USDA Foods may be used in the breakfast program. In fact, there's a wide variety of nutritious USDA food items available in fresh, frozen, canned, or dried forms that are low in sugar, salt, and fat. Many are ideal for breakfast and are available in individually wrapped serving sizes. Brown box and bulk items will be highlighted on the next few slides. Additionally, the Department of Defense Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, known as DoD Fresh, can be a great way to use entitlement to highlight seasonal items on breakfast trays. We have put together some examples to share with you. We will start with items that are practically ready to use, which we call brown box USDA foods. For example, there are several grain items that are well suited for breakfast, including oat circle cereal bowls, rolled oats, pancakes, and for those making breakfast burritos, whole grain tortillas. There are also many protein options available for those that choose to serve meat or a meat alternate at breakfast. For example, there is shredded cheese for those breakfast burritos, peanut butter in individual servings, peanut butter and sunflower seed butter packed in 5-pound jars, strawberry, blueberry, and vanilla flavored high protein yogurt in 4-ounce cups, and high protein vanilla yogurt packed in 32-ounce tubs, perfect for breakfast parfaits. There's also a wide variety of fruits available in fresh, canned, frozen, dried, and individually portioned forms. The frozen mixed berry, peach, apricot, strawberry fruit cups and applesauce cups are perfect for grab-and-go service. Canned peaches, pears, and apples are also available, as are dried cranberries, raisins, and dried fruit mix. Lastly, individual orange juice containers are a great breakfast option. In addition to the brown box items, there are many approved USDA food processors that make end products using USDA foods that are well suited for breakfast. Some examples of processed end products for breakfast include muffins, bread, French toast, breakfast sandwiches, wraps, burritos, and breakfast meats. For a list of USDA foods processors and examples of the items they make using USDA foods, please check out our food distribution program webpage on the CDE website, and we will drop the link into the chat. We encourage you to visit our food distribution program webpage for further information, including the USDA foods price list and serving guide, ordering, training, and policy information. And we'll also drop a link to that webpage in the chat. And if you have any questions related to the food distribution program, you can contact them by phone or email. Now, we want to share a funding opportunity that can help you to start up or expand your breakfast program. The California State Legislature appropriates $1.017 million in the annual state budget for school breakfast program and summer meal program startup and expansion grants. We commonly refer to this grant as the breakfast grant. It's a competitive grant for LEAs that want to start up or expand their school breakfast or summer meal program. Each LEA may apply for no more than 10 sites with up to $15,000 per site. So we're currently accepting applications for this grant, and applications are due March 1st. We're going to drop a link to the request for applications in the chat. Now let's review the eligibility requirements for the grant. Public school districts, county offices of education, and directly funded charter schools can apply. Schools must have at least 20% or more of students enrolled at the site approved for free or reduced price meals. And school sites must not have been awarded a breakfast grant within the past 3 years. All right, quickly we'll look at the timeline for the grants. So the request for applications is typically posted to the CDE funding webpage in January each year. The applications this year are due March 1st, so you still have time to apply. And we typically select our grantees by June, and we always aim to get funding out in July. The grant period is from July 1st through February 1st, and if that seems like a tight timeline, we can offer extensions on a case-by-case basis. Okay, here's a list of frequently requested equipment commonly purchased with breakfast grant funds. All products requested must be used to start up or expand your school breakfast program or school meal program. LEAs wanting to start serving breakfast outside of the classroom often request wireless point of sale systems and mobile food service carts. LEAs wanting to begin serving breakfast in the classroom often request insulated bags and wagons. And also think ahead, if you anticipate that your breakfast participation is going to increase under universal meals, you might consider purchasing more equipment like ovens, refrigerators, freezers, and milk coolers. For any questions about this grant, please contact the Breakfast Grant team at breakfastgrant@cde.ca.gov, and we'll drop that email address in the chat box. Okay, I'm now going to hand it over to Gurjeet Barea, manager of the School and Summer Nutrition Programs Administration. He'll be introducing our panelists and answering some frequently asked questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara and Becca. Really appreciate the really thorough overview of school breakfast. I think it's always great to have a healthy reminder about the best practices and then the resources that are out there to support schools as they work towards implementation. Next up, I'm really excited to transition us to hear from two of our special guests about the implementation of school breakfast from the local perspective that always brings so much value to these listening sessions. Our first speaker up is Dominic Maki. Dominic is a nutrition director at Mount Diablo Unified School District. Mount Diablo has an enrollment of just about 29,000 students. And is located in Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. Dominic brings a wealth of knowledge, more than I've probably forgotten already. Over 20 years of experience in school nutrition. And while he's kind of bounced around and worked at many different districts all over California, his mark really has been introducing scratch cooking and locally sourced products in all of the districts that he's worked at. He believes that high quality food and service can really translate into a positive experience for students, which of course really supports them in their academic success. So with that, Dominic, thanks for joining us, and I'll let you go ahead and take it away with your presentation.
Great, thank you, Gurjeet, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. So let me begin the presentation. As Gurjeet said, my name is Dominic Maki. I am the Director of Food and Nutrition Services and Warehouse for Mount Diablo Unified School District. And I'll go through just to kind of start out with when I came here. I'm a member of the community here in Mount Diablo in the cities of Concord and Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill. I'm a homeowner here in the district. And so I wanted to come home and really kind of finish out my career and work for my community. And one of the things that kind of caught me by surprise is that we had many schools that did not have a school breakfast program. And so I was approached by the district during the interview process with questions on how was I going to increase FTE hours for staff? How was I going to be able to provide health benefit opportunities and retirement opportunities? And so the breakfast program to me was kind of almost a no-brainer, where there was not only were we not, and we were denying access to breakfast to those students, which had no breakfast at all, to some of our free and reduced students, but there was also a revenue stream that could help support some other programs and financial assistance to our program that might allow for our staff to get more hours in FTE and give them other opportunities and benefits. So I'll go and start the presentation. So as Gurjeet said, yes, we are located about 23 miles east of San Francisco in the East Bay of the Bay Area. We serve and deliver breakfast, lunch, snack, and supper to 47 of our schools within about 150 square miles. Pretty close to 200 days out of the year. We're pretty much almost year round. This year, we're actually is the first year that we'll be not doing any kind of service or summer program in the month of July. We'll be doing it in the month of June. But in the department, we have about 140 employees. Our budget is about $12.5 million in revenue and expenses. And as I said, we participate in school breakfast, school lunch, after school snack, supper, and summer seamless food program. And we serve close to about 4 million meals annually a year. This is how our contribution, how we see it in the Food and Nutrition Services Department, how we contribute to the academic achievement for our students. So we're involved in student achievement. We have a lot of parents that are very involved, so definitely parental involvement. The school breakfast program actually is a big part of the school climate. Basic services, student engagement. So these are all things that we try to focus on, trying to support our students through nutrition towards their academic excellence. So move on. So when I came here, it was a very unusual model that was here in the district, but we definitely had 15 of our school sites did not offer breakfast at all. So that kind of caught me by surprise, because as Gurjeet said, I had been in about 3 to 4 other school districts before I got to come home. And I was kind of quite surprised to see that. And so that was one of the first implementations or plans that I implemented and executed, was to make sure that we had 100% of all of our school sites were going to offer breakfast. Typically here, there was a culture related to this. And the schools that did not offer breakfast were schools that were very, very low free and reduced populated schools in their enrollment. And so that has been something I remember about 20 years ago when I first started out and came into the school food service arena. That was a philosophy that if there was a school site that was more on the higher economic scale, that those students would not participate. I never felt that was true. And I learned that in 2 other school districts that had very low free and reduced in the district. And I had implemented second chance breakfast. That's something I did not put in the slides, but I believe in the second chance breakfast. I always have. I believe that students are so stressed by the time they get to school that traditional breakfast period can be a little challenging. Not in all sites. In our higher free and reduced sites, that has seemed to be where students really do participate. A lot of times, I hate to say it, it is being used sometimes as almost a daycare, because really the parents will drop off their students relatively very early, left to really the responsibility of a custodian and a lunch, or excuse me, and a food and nutrition services staff. And because the students trust our staff and are know the custodians and our food and nutrition staff so well, that that traditional breakfast program actually does work. But then we do know that there are many students, as we had seen in the slides before, the transportation issues and just trying to get your student on time. I know that myself as a parent, remembering trying to get my son to school on time, it always can be a challenge for a parent. So really operating with the second chance breakfast. But again, I want to go back to, just because a school is low free and reduced does not mean if you put out good food, the students will come. They will eat. And we proved that. So some of the old breakfast model was we had free and reduced students denied access to a school breakfast program. Staff did not have the FT hours. They were all at 3 to 3.5 hours they were working. So there was no FT hours to even have a school breakfast program. The schools with no school breakfast program were designated in this particular, in our district, we call them food transport schools. And what that means was we had one location that supported all 15 schools, where it was all prepackaged food, as you can see in the lower in the slide there. Really that displayed a really poor quality food, low participation. Students did not like the food at all. And so many parents were complaining to our board of trustees. Of course, this is before I got here, but when I came in, I had seen that. So there were some things that I had to do to reorganize these 15 schools, because they were almost treated separately outside of the traditional, the business model that we already had in place. So I had to do something about reorganizing these food transport schools. And in any of these 15 schools, the only thing that was provided was a school lunch. So what I did was, in the new model in 2018, I implemented 15 school breakfast programs in 15 elementary schools. So that was the first step. The second step is I took all my staff that we called they were called food transport assistants, and I reclassified them into the same classification, which we call a food service lead worker, in the rest of our elementary schools. So it's almost, I had 2 different menus going on. I had basically 2 different business models happening at the same time within the department. And that was very, very inefficient. It did not give the opportunity to students to even have a healthy, nutritious meal in these 15 schools. So something had to be done. So this is part of the reorganization process that I had executed and implemented, of course, with the approval of our board of trustees. But the one thing is we reclassified the staff and their FTE. We took them from a 3.5 hours to 5 hours, which therefore would then qualify them for health and retiree benefits such as CalPERS. So the difference and the change that we've seen was in 2016-17, On that annual year, we did about 822,000 plus breakfasts that we served under the old breakfast model. But when we implemented these reorganization of change, what I called the food transport schools, back into the same operation, same model as the rest of our elementary schools, you can see that we did a pretty good increase, about 150,000 breakfasts for the year, doing a second chance breakfast at 987,000, almost 988,000 breakfasts that we did in that 17-18 year. One thing that I've seen over the years when I do implement breakfast programs, and I can go back to my days when I was in Newark Unified School District, I had a principal that was really kind of fighting a school breakfast at the second chance. And one of the things she came to me after about a week had said, you know, I had 2 students that used to be in my office almost every other day because of behavioral issues. Now that we implemented this breakfast program, I haven't seen them in a week. And so really the behavioral issues do go on the decrease because students, you know, they're hungry at the first recess. The stress of just getting to school, and then by the time they settle down in the classroom for say that hour or hour and a half, and they get to the breakfast program, they have a choice usually of either going out and playing at recess or to eat. And in many cases, students are very hungry. They'll come in and make that choice to eat. So also with that said, that we had a happier school site staff, you know, and besides the, you know, here we have the the food and nutrition services staff that, you know, receive more hours. So they're feeling better about themselves because they feel opportunity. So it was just a good climate shift for each of these school sites. And then we supported a school meal program in schools which had typically low student participation in the program. And actually, we had one site that didn't think that they'd serve anything, and they ended up serving about 100 to 125 students on some good days, where we did, you know, serving breakfast to a school site that was very, very low in participation, and everybody thought that, you know, they wouldn't participate at all. So, you know, here are some of the roadblocks that I had heard and seen. I had a school site administrator say students don't really want to eat breakfast. I had actually a principal here in Mount Diablo that said, well, the parents are going to go to the podium for 3 minutes, and they're going to talk to the board of trustees, and they're going to tell, you know, the board of trustees how much they don't want breakfast in their schools. And I said, go ahead. I said, I think it's a great idea, and they should. And so that never happened. But that school site administrator, they were the ones that really didn't want to support the breakfast because it was just a little bit of extra work. So as you see here, you know, food and services staff, some of them said, well, it's just too much work, you know, because they were going to work more hours. So we overcame that. And once they've seen the change and seen the model that we put together and the quality of food they were putting out, because we weren't serving the prepackaged food, we were beginning to make food scratch made, as Brigitte said, that we do here in Mount Diablo. So as they've seen the students much happier and the food, the quality of food they were receiving, that made them much happier, and it kind of gave them some gratification for the work that they're doing. The other comments I used to hear, parents make breakfast for their students. Well, not really. I don't think they do. Some do, but not a very, very slim percentage. Parents are on the go, especially here in the Bay Area. This is a, you know, definitely at before COVID, and we're trying to get back to it now, but a, you know, a commuter community. I mean, parents had to, you know, they're on the road early in the morning. There's just a lot of juggling act going on. So parents making breakfast, I think, you know, those days of Leave It to Beaver, where June Cleaver was making breakfast every morning for the kids, that was kind of a little bit of a stretch. Breakfast has too much sugar. Those kind of comments come out of the teachers union, especially. We have teachers that make the comment, even though, you know, an apple has natural sugars, but there is sugar in it. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for the students. And so those are comments that we received many times. And then, of course, the most common one is that there's no supervision in the cafeteria. What am I going to do? And that's something where the site administrator struggles with. And, you know, in most cases, I've had principals that said, well, if a student chooses to have a breakfast, then they go in the multipurpose room and then they are to stay there. Some principals are a little more flexible. They say, well, once they're done, if there's supervision around, you know, and the teacher is usually out in the playground as part of their day, then it's, you know, it should be just fine. So, but that supervision seems to be one roadblock that I consistently heard all the time. Here's just a couple entrees. On the left is in Mount Diablo Unified School District. That is our famous cheese zombie. That recipe has been here since 1963. It is one of the most popular breakfast items that we have in the secondary schools. It's something that I get hit up all the time by alumni saying, hey, you still make the cheese zombies? I had one of those every day. So, basically it's dough that we make. We stuff it with American cheese, or we stuff it with many different variety of fillings that go in that. And that's a typical breakfast entree that meets the grain requirement, meets all the requirements that we have. On the right side, you see some blueberry muffins. We actually, we have a bakery that makes our batter for us up in West Sacramento. And we have just started our muffin program where we're baking off our own muffins. A couple reasons with that. Number one is we love the smell that comes out of the ovens, out of the cafeterias for the kids. The second is with all these supply chain issues, I found scratch cooking to be the most successful, that we don't have to rely on a manufacturer. There's so many supply chain issues out there. So by us scratch cooking, by us kind of processing, manufacturing our own food, has kind of reduced some of those pressures of the supply chain. And it's of a higher quality. And again, that smell, presentation, the look is something all our students enjoy. So again, here's how we contribute, to school climate through the school breakfast program. Food nutrition services will support a positive school climate by providing the highest quality food and customer service. This will directly support higher academic achievement and healthy behavioral outcomes for students. This is something we are very strongly believe in here at Mount Diablo Unified, as I'm sure many districts do. This is kind of our role in support services to academic achievement for all our students. And so what is our goals for the future? We continue to improve our communication with our parent and education community. That seems to be the biggest, not a hurdle, but it seems to be something that we target because we want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible with our parent education community. You can see that on our website, on our webpage. We try to provide as much information as we possibly can, as many school districts do, but it's something that's a focus of ours. Staff training program, when you scratch cook, it's constant training. We invest a lot into training into our staff internally here in the district, especially in the culinary art. We try to work with them in new recipe development. We listen to them as far as their feedback. Some cases they enjoy it. Some cases it's kind of hits a dark hole, but we have to work them through that, because at the end of the day, if it's higher quality food and service providing the students, that's the role that we play. Food trucks are definitely in the horizon. This is something that I am very passionate about. I kind of, when I was at Davis Joint Unified, I built a food truck there, and so I've seen the success, and so that's going to be a goal for us down here, especially as we go into construction projects, and we'll be renovating cafeterias in the next decade for sure. So this is something I'm working on. Also invest in mobile food units in the high schools. We're taking a look at golf carts as an example. When you're talking about bringing out, where the students are, I found that a golf cart is a definite possibility. I think once we get through this, these pandemic times and labor shortages and all of that issues that we're seeing right now, that'll be something to get our people mobile, to put them out there, as long as we've already kind of gone through a design phase where the golf cart is self-sustainable and can provide the service to the students and the quality of food, where they don't have to come into the cafeteria. And then in the future is definitely, we would love to have a central kitchen. That is a conversation I'm having with our school district and our board of trustees as we speak. So, and to finish out, if anybody has any questions about the presentation or any questions at all, here's my contact information at Mount Diablo Unified School District. Here's our phone number, extension 3775. And then at the bottom, you can see my email address. So please feel free. And Gurjit, I think I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dominic. I got to say, you've got all of us craving those cheese zombies. We got multiple requests in the Q&A for them, and our very own director, Kim Frenzel, actually can remember the smell of those cheese zombies from her days at Mount Diablo Unified. So definitely a very memorable menu item. Thanks so much for that presentation, Dominic. I think a lot of things that really just kind of jumping out. I mean, expanding school breakfast at 15 sites. What an accomplishment. And you really touched on, the key of, the ultimate goal, the why, supporting those kids and seeing a reduction in behavioral issues. I think, that's a great way to get any school administrator on your side. So kudos to you, and thanks again for joining us. Next up, we have Susie Hotwig, the nutrition director at Burton Elementary School District in Tulare County in the Central Valley. Burton Unified has an enrollment of about 4,700 students. Susie herself brings 30 years of experience working at Burton School District. And she's really proud of the difference that her team has been able to make in the area of specifically of student engagement, and really doing that through hands-on culinary experiences with some project-based learning and hands-on experience for her students. So Susie, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And let's hear a little bit about your breakfast program.
Good afternoon. Let me share my screen. Once again, thank you for inviting me to be a panelist and share some of the great things that we're doing in Burton School District. This Breakfast in the Classroom has been our new project for the year. We started this in August as a solution for limiting contact of different groups of students during this dark cloud of COVID. And we discovered that congregate feeding was not allowing us to properly contact trace if we did have a student that contracted COVID-19. So we put our heads together, and we've been talking about doing breakfast in the classroom for a while. And to be perfectly honest, I was kind of resistant against it. It was, it was working what we were doing, and it was just something new. So I was hesitant. But when it came to the point where we had no choice to be able to keep our students safe, we jumped right in. And we had the ability to have this happen because we had all our tools in place. We had our wagons from the previous year of sending meals home with students. We had cold bags. We had ice packs. We had all the tools ready to go. And the most important thing that we had was we had an energetic staff that knew they could accomplish things that they had never accomplished before. And one thing we have in our district, when I call my group together and I stick my hand in my pocket and I pull out a handful of dimes and start passing the dimes out to my staff, they know that I'm getting ready to ask them to pivot on a dime, and we're going to do something new. So that's a fun team building routine that we have, and it gets them ready to see what else we're going to do. So the number one thing that we had from the beginning was support from our superintendent's office, and our assistant superintendent was very instrumental in preparing the staff, the teaching staff, for this new initiative. And they had about a week to get ready for it. And so we started with a presentation to them of the pluses for breakfast in the classroom and all the different things that were increased and the positive things that were decreased, tardiness and behavioral issues and the absenteeism, and then also the stigma of, only kids that are free and reduced eat school breakfast. Now it took away that stigma. So the students quickly got into the routine in the classroom. How it works is our staff prepares wagons with clipboards and the teacher's names on the clipboard, and that clipboard has the paperwork that the teacher fills out for us every day and returns with the wagon. And the students learned basic hygiene, hand washing, So they do that when they first come in the classroom. And as you can see, they're wearing their masks, and they don't take their masks off until they are seated at their seat. And then part of it is training of the teachers on how to recognize a reimbursable meal and do the paperwork that's required in this program. But there was really very little pushback to that, because the teachers could quickly see that all the benefits, the number one being improved academic performance, that the students were not hungry coming in, and that they were able to concentrate on their studies when they got to school. And the reduced behavior problems, as Dominic shared with us, the administrators love the fact that they see these kids that had previously been a challenge and frequent in the office in the morning. Maybe those kids were just hungry. And once that was tackled, the students had less behavior problems, and so did the teachers, and ultimately the principals didn't see so much of those in the office. And that the breakfast program, with our requirements, the students receive a very well-balanced, healthy breakfast, that they may not have gotten a complete meal at home, as they were just given, one component as they walked out the door. As they came to eat breakfast in the classroom, they were able to have a complete breakfast. And I just love this quote that our assistant superintendent came up with, that don't let a hungry stomach lead to a distracted mind. And if that could be the mantra for breakfast in the classroom, that would be it. And one of the areas of pushback that we thought we would have from the teaching staff is that they would be losing instructional minutes. But they soon found out that they could get those early morning housekeeping duties done while their students were eating. They could take roll, they could get the lunch count, they could do announcements. And we approached it from the standpoint of when you go to a meeting, when you go to a workshop, they usually have refreshments for you, and you enjoy sitting there and talking quietly to your neighbor and getting settled for your time of learning. Well, so do students. And so the perceptions that were there about having breakfast in the classroom that was possibly negative was, again, that it will cut into the instructional time. But we found that did not happen. And that another one is that classroom meals will be messy. We were afraid of this, so we were real proactive in how we approached it. We at first had printed placemats that went in every wagon, and dispensers of napkins and wet wipes to clean up the surfaces, small trash cans outside of the classroom that were on wheels so they could go help the custodians with cleanup. But we found that the students took pride in their space, and they didn't want to work on a dirty table. So they quickly learned to clean up after themselves. And if they had a spill, they would wipe it up. But that really has been a non-issue. And that the teachers would resist the idea. Well, we had a few that pushed back. Some comments that I had to kind of protect my staff from. But ultimately, they were able to get these positive affirmations from teachers once we got going, as they would come in and pick up their wagons in the mornings. They thanked the staff. We got to see the teachers one-on-one, where we may not have seen those teachers except, you know, a few times a year. Now we see those teachers every morning as they come in to get their wagons. So it's improving the culture and helping our staff get to know each other. We, as I said before, our superintendent was really proactive in getting the message out to the teaching staff of what was expected with this program, and in a positive way, and really making it clear what the why was. So I just can't emphasize enough the importance of front loading this conversation with the staff, the teaching staff, as well as the nutrition services staff. But this little girl, she came in to get her wagon in the morning, and this is the cook at one of our sites. And so they get to greet the kids, and the kids take turns coming in to get wagons if the teachers don't come in to get them. So it's a fun thing for them to do. And then the paperwork, we were clear about sending out how this was going to work. And we're doing the seamless summer program. So we're just taking a tally of how many students are getting a complete meal. So the teachers do a hashtag mark on the state form, and they sign and date it and tally the meals. And then that comes back to our cashiers, who then put it into our point of sale system. And these were just some good resources for breakfast programs, breakfast in the classroom programs. And this is my contact information if you have any more questions. I just want to share with you some of our wins with this. It is the increased participation in our program. We were able to increase our breakfast participation by about 30%. That enabled us to give more time to our part-time employees. So that helped with employee buy-in. And not having a hungry stomach and the students concentrating on that has been a big win for the classroom teacher. And a couple of challenges that we didn't think about. One is the teacher allergies, airborne allergies. We had a teacher that had to use an EpiPen because we had a banana muffin. It did not have nuts in it, but it was prepared in a facility that had nuts. And I guess she was so severe, and she was not eating the muffin, but just having that opened in her classroom caused her to have to use her EpiPen. That was a surprise. Another teacher has a severe cinnamon allergy. So just inhaling the cinnamon from the cinnamon roll gave that teacher also a reaction. So make sure you ask those questions. We're real good about taking care of our kids with allergies, but that was one thing that caught me by surprise. Another thing is that our students prefer the room temperature or cold breakfast items rather than hot breakfast items, which was kind of surprising to me because they like the hot breakfast items more in the cafeteria setting. We haven't eliminated those completely, but we're down to doing those about once or twice a week. Just because we want, they're our customers and we want to give them the things that they want to eat in the classroom. And maybe those hot items are a little bit messier. And that may be part of the drawback, but those were just some of the things that we noticed as a challenge. But we're not going to be stuck there. We're gonna move on and see what we can do to meet those challenges. As far as our future, I cannot see us going away from this breakfast in the classroom model. For elementary students, we also have a second chance breakfast for 7th through 12th students. That's been very successful. And we're finding that students are eating breakfast at their brunch time that never participated in our programs before. Teenagers typically don't get hungry until about 10 o'clock. So it hits at a good time for them to have a second chance breakfast. As was mentioned in my my bio, I've been here for 30 years. I'm getting ready to pass the torch on to the next person that can have an opportunity to have a job that doesn't feel like a job, that's more play than work, and be able to create that opportunity for someone else. So I will be retiring at the end of this school year, but I'll still be available until June if you have any questions, and I'm sure that the district will find someone to take my place that will keep my staff in good regard, and they truly are the rock stars in all of this, and the bright spots in this COVID-19 cloud. I think all of us that are in this position have seen our staffs rise to the occasion, and the reputation of nutrition services staff has been elevated, certainly in our school district, because people have seen us and seen what we can do. So thank you very much, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Susie. First of all, congratulations on your upcoming retirement. What an exciting time. I mean, 30 years. I think you've done a lot for the students and your staff in your district. So thanks for sharing that with us. I think you talked a lot about the value that staff bring, and that was something that, to me, came across through both in your presentation and as well as in Dominic's. Dominic mentioning early on that expanding breakfast, he was actually able to increase hours and be able to offer health benefits for his staff. That's certainly a great way to get staff buy-in. And then Susie, that great quote, I had to write that down. Don't let a hungry stomach lead to a distracted mind. I might have to put that up on my own desk in the mornings when I'm starting my workday to make sure I can be ready to fire up and be ready for all of our meetings. So thank you again, both Susie and Dominic, for sharing those local perspectives. Really does kind of add an extra layer to these listening sessions that often that we can't quite fully understand at the state level. So next up, we are going to kind of wrap up and flow into the end of this meeting by transitioning to some frequently asked questions around universal meals. I do certainly want to thank all of you who have reached out to us through that universal meals inbox. I know we've been pitching it a lot. And while we don't always have all of the answers, it's the questions and the feedback that we receive through these listening sessions and through that mailbox that really help us as we work towards implementation and issuing kind of formal policy guidance. If you've submitted a question in today's Q&A and you didn't get a response, I do encourage you to please email that to our Universal Meals inbox that you have up on the screen here, and we'll certainly work to incorporate those questions into future updates. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive right into some frequently asked questions. So the first one up that we have is, what's the minimum amount of time that's required between breakfast and lunchtime? There is no federal requirement that states the amount of time that has to pass between breakfast and lunch. The federal regulations just define breakfast as the meal that's served to a kid in the morning hours. that the meal is served at or near the beginning of the child's day at school. So that could be before the school day, like we heard from Dominic. It could be breakfast after the bell, like we heard from Susie. And then for lunches, schools must offer lunches during the period that the school's designated for lunch. So the lunch hour must fall between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And again, that's under the federal requirements for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs. The next question, and this is one that we've gotten quite a bit, not just today, but in previous sessions, and it's simply asking, are LEAs required to offer breakfast and lunch to students on school days in which they are not on campus? And so the simple answer to this is no. The state meal mandate, that first pillar of universal meals, that expansion of the state meal mandate, it applies when students are on campus. So for example, let's say you have an independent study learner that is that studies from home, works from their own home 4 days a week. But 1 day a week that student comes to campus for some type of in-person activity. To meet that state meal mandate, you would have to provide a meal, offer meals to that child on the 1 day of the week that they are on campus. For those other 4 days, the state meal mandate does not apply. The next question is, can meals be sent home with students to consume off campus? This is kind of a nuanced answer here, but under USDA waivers, so in this COVID pandemic reality that we're all living in, that is allowed, and it is allowed under a USDA specific waiver. However, that waiver would have to be updated and extended in order for that practice to continue. So I think, I believe it was during during Tara's session, she was talking a little bit about grab and go breakfast. And there were some questions around, oh, does this mean that under universal meals, a kid can just take a breakfast meal and take it off campus? And I think there's a distinction between grab and go breakfast on campus and a non-congregate breakfast service. So, grab and go is a model where a child may pass through a meal line, they're grabbing their breakfast, and then they're heading to their class, or they're heading into the quad to consume that meal. That's different than the federal waivers that we've been operating under these last, it's already been 2 years. So under universal meals, the federal requirements will still apply. And if there are waivers in place, then of course we would be able to take advantage of those as well. So the next question, and these next few, we're going to transition to alternative income forms. We've had a lot of questions about these over the last couple of weeks. I think naturally as schools are starting to kind of prepare for the upcoming school year. So the first one is pretty straightforward. What are alternative income forms? And so typically, alternative income forms are used just to gather individual income information from households, primarily for a district's local control funding formula purpose, the LCFF. In normal times, household meal applications are also used to gather this income information. And again, in normal times, it's only agencies that operate, Provision 2 on a non-base year or CEP that use these alternative income forms. However, with all the waivers in place, we do know that the use of alternative income forms has really expanded during the pandemic under the USDA waivers, which kind of naturally leads us to our next question, which is, what is that difference? What's the difference between a meal application and an alternative income form? And the easiest way for me to understand this is to think about the purpose of the form. So remember, those alternative income forms, it is a state form. And the intent of that form, the purpose of that form, is for a district to be able to collect information for local control funding formula purposes. It's a unique California thing. In normal times, those alternative income forms are utilized by those schools that cannot collect a meal application under the federal programs, i.e. Provision 2 or community eligibility provision. A meal application is a federal requirement, and the purpose of the meal application, first and foremost, is to establish an individual child's eligibility for a meal under the National School Lunch and School Breakfast program. So, there are some very distinct differences between those forms, and just to help kind of separate the two, think about that meal application as attached to free and reduced price benefits, and the alternative income form as an LCFF benefit for both the child but also for the district. The next question, and we've gotten this, I think, as schools are starting to prepare their alternative income forms, is there, do alternative income forms have to be pre-approved by CDE, and can LEAs use a Google form to collect the information for LCFF funding? So the CDE, we do have a number of templates that are available on the website. However, LEAs are not required to use those alternative income forms. You can develop your own form. And while CDE doesn't necessarily review and approve individual samples or individual alternative income forms, schools do have to ensure that the minimum information on that alternative income form is collected. So what is that information, Gurjeet? So there's really kind of three critical pieces of information that have to be collected on an alternative income form. The first is you have to have information that you can identify the pupil or the pupils living in that household. So, student name, got to be able to connect it back to a student. The second piece is that you must have enough information to make the determination of whether or not that pupil or the household is eligible for free or reduced priced meals under the federal income criteria. So, at a minimum, you're talking the number of pupils in the household and the income that the household is making. And then third, there has to be a certification there on the form for the family to certify that the information that they are providing on that form is indeed true and correct. So those are the pieces that are at a minimum must be collected for alternative income forms. And then our last FAQ today, before we kind of transition into our conclusion here, is, how can LEAs incentivize households to complete alternative income forms? So, we've heard this a lot. Households they're not required to submit an alternative income form. However, we do know that the school districts that are able to conduct outreach to households to really explain the benefits and the importance of the information that's collected have really had a higher return on those forms from families. We've also heard from school districts that best practices like building it into a part of their enrollment process or developing an online form that is very easy and simple and quick for families to complete has also definitely increased the response rate on those forms. If I'm sure there are many more questions about alternative income forms, so do not fear. I know we didn't cover them all, but as you can see on the slide, in April, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of alternative income forms. So make sure that you join us for that session. And then next month, on March 8th, we'll be focusing on charter school and small school districts and really how those smaller program operators can navigate both school nutrition programs and the universal meals programs that are going to be launching here. So keep an eye out in your inboxes. The registration for the March session should be going out later this week. If you do have additional questions on universal meals that we didn't cover today, if you have requests for specific types of training, for resources, please submit those to our universal meals inbox, and we can use that as we continue to kind of build towards implementation. So I do see we have about 10 minutes left here. So there are some questions that I want to kind of take a deeper dive into, just things that I noticed that were kind of popping up in the chat, some common themes that we saw. So one question that I saw come up a number of times is really around verification. So the impact that universal meals will have on verification. So when we think about universal meals, let's remember first and foremost that California Universal Meals is designed to supplement the federal programs. So all of the federal requirements and regulations that are in place they're still intact. None of those, I know it's a hard concept to understand because we're living in a world where there's so many of those requirements are waived. But under universal meals in California, first and foremost, we have to continue to abide by the federal requirements because we do not, we don't want to risk any federal funding essentially. So when it comes to topics like verification, so what's the impact on verification going to be? For schools that are operating standard meal counting and claiming procedures, where you're still required to, to send out, collect, process meal applications, there won't be a change. Verification is going to be a process that is continued to be required by the USDA. Of course, we've seen a lot of things waived, so I would never say never. But if we're returning to standard counting and claiming, it should be expected that if you're collecting meal applications, that the verification requirement would also apply. Now, verification may change for school districts that opt into either CEP or maybe doing a provision 2 as a result of the second pillar in universal meals, right? So the second pillar says that if you have an ISP of 40% or higher, that you must opt into one of the federal provisions. We anticipate that most commonly that will be CEP because it really does give the most amount of administrative flexibility to districts and is probably the easiest to implement. But you can choose from any of the federal provisions that are available. And if you do that at all of your school sites, then verification activities go away, right? So that's another one of those key differences between alternative income forms and meal applications. Alternative income forms being a state form, those are not subject to federal verification requirements like meal applications are. I did talk a little bit about kind of the difference between grab and go and non-congregate. We saw a lot of questions kind of coming in as to what to expect from USDA with waivers, and I left my crystal ball at home today, but I've been checking it every single day, and we're not withholding any information. We don't know what the USDA is going to do with waivers. But again, I just want to emphasize that the way universal meals is designed is that it layers on top of the federal program requirements. So if USDA extends waivers or if USDA waivers come to an end, it will not impact the implementation of universal meals in the sense that the program will start regardless. It will just it'll be implemented within whatever those guidelines are that the USDA establishes for the upcoming school year. Another question that we saw that came up was, breakfast before the bell. So we understand that there's a little nuance in the language. In Assembly Bill 130, it specifies that both breakfast and lunch be offered during each school day. I think that during was just kind of a poor choice of words. So we have clarified the intent is to make sure that a breakfast meal is offered each school day. So, today we heard from Susie and how she's really had some success in offering breakfast after the bell. However, it's not a requirement. Breakfast after the bell is not a requirement for universal meals. If you choose to implement a traditional breakfast model like breakfast before the bell, like how Dominic talked about, that will meet the requirement of universal meals. It's each school day you're offering a child both of those meal types. When it comes to breakfast, you have the option in how you utilize that. So whether you're doing a grab and go breakfast model, whether you're doing a second chance breakfast in the classroom, or if you're just doing traditional breakfast before the bell, all of those different models meet the intent of universal meals, which is ensuring that all kids have access to a breakfast and a lunch every school day. And just kind of the last piece, so we had a number of questions around funding calculations and how is the funding going to be calculated? And the easiest way for me to conceptualize funding is, as a local operator, think about the amount of reimbursement that you would normally receive for a free meal. Now I know normal is it's a bad word, right? Because we're so far away from normal. But the amount of reimbursement that you would receive for a free lunch or a free breakfast under the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program. So you get a chunk of free reimbursement from the feds, and the state of California currently provides an additional Prop 98 reimbursement on top of that. Whatever that total number is, think of that as kind of your reimbursement rate. Under universal meals, California will provide an additional reimbursement on top of the reduced priced and the paid reimbursement levels to reach that kind of that whatever that target number is. So, think about your NSLP rate plus your Prop 98 rate. Of course, the NSLP rate will change. It'll be revised for next year, but you will receive the free reimbursement rate for every meal that you serve, so long as you participate in both the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. That is a very clear requirement. In order to be eligible for the Universal Meals Funds, you have to participate in both of those programs. And that, I think, is truly kind of how I've mentioned a couple times now, building on those federal requirements. We want to build upon the federal programs that are already out there. We don't want to supplant the very strong school nutrition programs that exist. This is a program that will build upon that, and that will provide some additional funding for schools to be able to stand that up. So I think that kind of covers the main questions that we wanted to kind of go over today. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We know there's so much going on here as we roll into the spring and getting ready for the new school year. So we appreciate you guys taking time away from your busy days to join us for another Universal Meals listening session. We look forward to seeing you all on March 8th. So again, our next session will be March 8th, and we will focus specifically on small program operators, including charter schools and school districts, and how they can successfully implement school nutrition programs. And if you have more questions about those alternative income forms, please be sure to join us in April, where we'll really take a deep dive into that flexibility and that option. So thank you all again, and have a great afternoon.